This candidate had actually called our customers and interviewed them about their experience with Mews. It's those interviews that stand out because it is so rare that a candidate goes above and beyond. And those are the people that I'm looking for.
You want people who are going to disagree with you, but then also you want people who deeply understand their function.
You can either send your resume to 100 jobs and not really know what you're interviewing for, or you can do 3 applications and do them really, really well and nail a job.
We talk about that so often because I think the kind of prevailing wind in social media says, here's this tool that'll help you apply to thousands and thousands of jobs. And actually the reality is going deep and helping understand that business and show that you can solve their business problems. That is the way forward. Hello and welcome to the Open to Work podcast. Very, very special episode today. We're joined by Matt, the CEO of Mews. Before I get into that, obviously want to remind everyone that we're coming to you live every Monday across YouTube, Apple and Spotify. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. We've just dropped an amazing job search tracker where you can track every single job that you have going, who you're speaking to, how to get in contact with the next person, recommendations on timelines and stuff like that. It's really awesome. So check out the Open to Work toolkit and we'll be dropping this episode directly into your inbox. So without any further ado, Matt, welcome to the Open to Work podcast.
Thank you. Why is it very special? I love that that's the intro. Do you say that every week when you introduce someone, or is it very special today?
No, I say it every week, and I do butcher the intro about 3 out of 4 times and have to re-record it, and I say it live, so I don't pre-record it and have it as like a cut in that we just have as the same cut every single week. Right. I have to do it every time, and I'm rubbish at self-promotion. Any kind of regular listener knows that I don't have like calls to action and subscribe to this and
right down below,
yeah, exactly. Comment here. Like I'm not very good at that, but it's still working. It's still growing. It's still doing its thing.
Right. Thanks, Darren.
But thank you so much for coming on today. This is a kind of extra special episode. Anyone who has been following my journey will know that I now work at Mews. And so my kind of brow is slightly more sweaty as we come into this conversation today. And I've been extra thoughtful about my questions. But I was really keen to get Matt to kind of take us on his journey of hiring through Mews, as many of you out there will be thinking, well, how do I apply to Mews when it's 100 people? And then how do I apply to Mews when it's 1,000 people? And what's the difference in mentality happening behind the scenes there? And that's really what we're going to uncover here today. So Matt, as we start with every episode of this podcast, as if you were in an interview, tell me about yourself.
So I'm Matt. I'm a hotelier by trade. Like I've always grown up knowing I was going to be a hotelier, and then that passion like really just transpired throughout my life. And I did hotel school, then started working in hotels, and then I realized there was a real problem in hotels with technology. And at some point, I am restless as a person. And if you're in a corporate career and if you're in that for about 2 years, you realize that the second year you're repeating what you did last year. And that frustrated the hell out of me. And luckily, my previous job was pretty good at every year promoting me so I could do new things. Mm-hmm. But at some point, when you go into that corporate ladder, you don't get a promotion every year. And within a year, I was bored. And I was like, I need to get out of this life. This is not for me. And then luckily, I ran into Richard, and then I joined him in the startup. And I'd never taken any risks in my life because I am a planner. My whole life, my resume, everything that's on my resume, I had thought deeply about why I was doing certain things so that my resume would look really good, my stints in certain jobs. And then suddenly you go into startup life, and then everything changes. And it was very hectic for a couple of years, but we've luckily done really well in the latter part of that startup. But the first years were definitely very tumultuous.
And so give me a sort of sense of like the size and scale of Mews when you joined it and when you became CEO.
3 guys and me. Okay. So it was Richard had found 2 students of the technical university, and he had a graphic designer on the side that he could pull in for projects. And we didn't know that there was different types of graphical designers. So we just got a graphical designer thinking this is probably good enough. And then these 2 students were still studying. And then on the sides, they would come in the afternoons in the office. And we had rented a basement in Prague. And then the first few years, like basically hiring meant, do you have any friends? Like that's literally like who in your school, like, do you know that you could pull in? And that was hiring for us in the beginning. We basically hired the friends of friends of friends because we didn't have recruiters. We didn't have an outbound strategy, a brand for employers. So it was pretty low key.
Yeah, I bet. But then now kind of setting the scene Tell me about where Mews is today from that moment of sitting around a table with you and a couple of students.
A bit bigger. We are now 1,300 employees, or I think 1,350
Yeah.
probably, and we're growing every month by about 30 to 40 different people. We employ people in over 20 countries. Like it's a complex beast of
Hmm.
employment that we've built. And like it's funny because our chief people officer joined us, I think now 2.5, 3 years ago. And I
Hmm.
said, what was the size when you entered? And she's like 600 people. So in 2 years, we basically added 700 people to this organization, which is incredible.
Yeah. And remind everyone, so what problem is Mews here to solve? And then we'll get into the hiring challenges.
Yeah, so everyone travels, right? Everyone has ever stayed in a hotel before, and we've all had disjointed experiences with the front desk. And we basically are the system that operates the back office of a hotel. So all of your reservation data sits in that system. Your guest profile sits in that system, and then we build an entire infrastructure so that we can help change those experiences that we have in hotels for the better. So a little bit like how you had the taxi industry and then Uber came in and suddenly no one takes taxis anymore because you on your own phone you can call a taxi, it's paid for automatically, you just walk out. And that's how we've reimagined hotels where you can check in online, you don't have to stand in a queue at a reception desk, you have digital keys, we take payments automatically. So we really just rethink the way
Hmm.
that hotels operate.
Yeah, and this is kind of pushed us towards, I think, 250 million in revenue last year. Driving towards, we will be doing significantly more than that, and so very much on a trajectory of growth, which has been super exciting to be a part of as well. So, jumping in though, when Mews was like 100 employees, so you're beyond maybe minimum proof of concept. You're starting, people are buying the product, and you've got a bit of investment. What were some of the key traits that you looked at back then, and what were some of the key like levers you were using to shape what the early team looked like?
So I remember the early days when it was literally friends of friends, and then you had this stage where like, oh crap, this is the year when we're going to go from 50 to 100 people. And I thought, we don't even like, what's an employer brand? I remember, and I joined an HR community thinking I should probably learn about this whole HR thing. And then I joined this community, and within a week, I was like, "Oh, there's a thing called employer brand. I should probably have a website that I built, and employee tracking system." And like being in these communities is really helpful when you're early stage scaling. I remember my assistant at the time, I said, could you do this interview for me because I don't have time for it? And then she did the interview and I thought, did you like that? And she's like, yeah, I love this. Love that. Great. Do you want to be the HR director? Like that is literally how you start up when everyone is scrappy and you just get shit done and you're looking for that entrepreneurial spirit where if you're a one trick pony and you've got one skill, early stage startups for 100 people, it's probably not your jam because
Hmm.
we will pull you into projects when something goes wrong. We're like, great, you're now in implementations, actually we need you in support, and suck it up, that's just what life is. So you're looking for people that have transferable skills with
Hmm.
like more generalism, who are unafraid, who are happy to work crazy hours if they need to. And that is definitely a very different skill set than what we're looking for today, when
Mm.
everything is a specialized function.
And what were some of the big mistakes you think you made back then when it came to hiring? What were some of your biggest learnings?
Like we didn't have a recruiter early on. We only started with a recruiter probably when we were hundreds, 150 people. And
Hmm.
that was quite trend. And it wasn't even a professional recruiter. The first one, it was just a guy we thought was very social. And we're like, great, you do recruitment then, figure it out. Now having seen professional recruiters and how they do their job, it's truly incredible. Those people that can look at a resume and very quickly get to the core of a person, and do that and enjoy that job and really find people. Because I'm not that interested in people that are open to work. I'm people that are not open to work and convincing them to come work for us because they're loved by a different employer. And I'm like, there's something about these people that I want to pull into the business.
Mm.
And that's a specialized skill set that recruiters have that I don't have. I remember me and Richard would be like on LinkedIn writing like these notes to young boys in technical university. We're like, oh, this feels so off, like to try and entice people to come into our business because we just didn't know what to say, how to say it. And recruitment is a real job. That's a really specialized skill set that not many people like. And when you find those gems in the business, that became quite transformative for us. Once we
Hmm.
started really professionalizing the recruitment side of it, we could start seeing a different caliber of talent coming in. And also, we used agencies in the early days, right? Because we didn't have a budget for a full time recruiter. So we used agencies. they don't have the same incentives as an in-house recruiter does to bring people in. So an agency needs to close the role so that they can get their commission and move on to the next thing. And it doesn't really matter if that person is going to stick with us for the next 3 years, but an in-house recruiter cares because that's their in-house reputation. They get our culture. They know what they're looking for. They know which people survived and which people didn't survive.
Mhm.
So I'm very much of the mind that in-house recruitment for the majority of roles works really well, and then for the very smaller, like 5 to 10% of roles that are very specialized, yes, that's where recruitment externally
Mhm.
comes in.
I think there's a lot of different elements there, but what you focused on is on kind of process and scale and the operation and of how you've been able to go on that journey. I think I'm quite interested to see like what were like the individual mistakes when you know in the people and how you assess and how you thought about talent at that time versus maybe even how you think about talent today.
So in the early days, we weren't professionals, so we just very much
Hmm.
went on emotion.
Yeah.
So, for example, we didn't use scorecards to evaluate people. So I would do an interview, and then my colleague would do an interview, and the other one, and we'd all ask the same questions over and over to that person. Whereas now, often when we approach the process, we say, "Okay, you're the first interview, so these are the skill sets that we'd like you to dig into,"
Hmm.
and then every interview, we're trying to get a slightly different perspective. That is not how we interviewed in the first day. It was very like, right, Richard, have you got time? Great, you do the interview, and then I would step in. And bringing structure to it is important, and especially if you want to start to diversify your pool, bringing in a real structure like scorecards tries to remove bias from the process, and we were definitely biased by our own unconscious biases. Basically, you
Hmm.
hire what you think you like, and we've learned through time that actually we like people that disagree with us, and those are not always the people that in an interview you might like, but they'll say things that make you think.
Hmm.
And in the beginning, we did hire a lot of white men in our business, and that didn't make for the most diverse group to build the most diverse products effectively. So that definitely was one of the big things, bringing structure to the hiring process.
Hmm. And when you look at things from the outside at Muse, there's a real kind of cultural core, and you mentioned there like trying to hire people who disagree with you. And so, how have you embedded or thoughts about embedding that culture into the way that you interview and the way that you think about hiring talent at Muse over the kind of changes that you've been through over the last couple of years?
Like I love these questions about, tell me about a time when you disagree with your manager, and
Hmm.
then they'll give me a flat example, and I go deep on it because I'm like,
Hmm.
I won't take any example, or if they just say, oh, or sometimes I'm not gonna know. Give me one specific example of when you disagreed. How did you have that conversation with your manager? How did you approach that challenge? And then once I've got the manager example, I'm like, okay, so tell me about a time when you disagree with a colleague, because that's a very different dynamic relationship that's
Hmm.
sometimes harder to manage. And I really go deep on specific examples rather than people staying at the top level. I'm intrigued by the behaviors that people show or the legacy that they leave behind in a
Hmm.
company, and that's one of our favorite questions recently, when like, what's the legacy you've left behind at a company? And I'm not looking for some flat answer. I'm looking for like, what have you changed at this
Hmm.
company that you've come from that they're still doing today because of the thing you did, and that they thought was so good that even when you're not in the business, we're going to continue doing that. And I think that is a really powerful thing to look for.
Hmm. And it sounds like you, as like an individual, have gone on like quite the journey on how you think about like interviewing and talent and stuff like that. What were some of your biggest influences along that journey?
People like Naomi, for example, our chief people officer, they think differently. And Naomi's a deep thinker, and I'm a fast thinker. So I love surrounding myself with people that think very differently. And like when I listen to her and how she approaches challenges or how she verbalizes what she thinks, it helps me. So I
Hmm.
try and surround myself with talents that is distinctly different from me, that is very deeply specialized in the skill set that they have, because I'm a
Yeah.
generalist. I can talk about any topic to a surface level, but if you go deep, you're going to lose me. And then you've got specialists around that can go very deep. And every time I feel uncomfortable, which is regularly, that I'm on a topic that has gone deep, I'm like, I don't think I follow this anymore. But then I'll be unashamed to ask the question, saying, I don't follow what we're saying. Explain it to me like I'm an idiot. And I think that's a really important skill set that helped me develop, because I realize every time I'm out of depth, that I don't step away from it, because I don't get to step away. As a
Hmm.
CEO, I have to be comfortable on every topic. And every time I feel out of depth, I go deep on it. the other day, I wrote a message to our VP corporate development, and I said, I'm uncomfortable with some of these discussions that we're having with investors because I just don't understand the metrics. Can you train me? And it's like identifying when you're uncomfortable and going for it. Like me realizing we're going to hire 50 more people. That is a duplication of our company. And I don't know how to approach that level. Let me just join a HR community. And like, I left after 2 years because I thought, yeah, I've got everything from this community. I need to move on to a bigger thing. But every time I feel slightly nervous, I jump deeply into that
Yeah.
topic.
And funnily enough, I was just talking to my wife about this topic only the other day. But the ability to ask for help is such an underrated ability, I think, in our growth. And I think you can kind of connect it to curiosity and stuff like that. But even I think, become established like you have to know everything, and you have to be the expert in everything. You have to come across like you know everything. And so that ability to have a bit of vulnerability and go, actually, I need some help. Can you show me? Is quite special, I think, and something that we need to dig
And
into.
AI is your friend here, right? So like you don't have embarrassment when you ask
Yeah.
AI the dumb question. So I don't have an embarrassment to ask humans, but most people do. So AI is fantastic at this because you can
Mhm.
actually say, I don't understand this topic. Give it to me like I'm a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old or whatever age group you want, because it's really good at translating really complex things in that language. And I use it all the time to ask the dumbest of questions.
So Oddison James are one of the leading people and talent agencies. Since 2013, they've been responsible for over 1,000 people and talent hires, including one in a company that I used to work at. They helped me hire my head of technology TA. So I know the guys there pretty well. They've been responsible for scaling some of the most innovative companies in the UK and the EU. Also recently just launched in the US. So even folks in your neck of the woods now, James, can get involved for contingent, retained, and executive search. And they also now do embedded through AJX. So they can do it all. So if you think you talked about the maturity model of like going from generalist, and you just want people who are kind of scrappy and getting really dig into the details when you were 100 people, and I think that based on my experience as well of working with a number of different startups, that's quite consistent. They're looking for the drive. They're looking for someone who can pick problem solvers,
Yeah.
a bunch of different problem solvers who happen to have a skill that you don't currently have in the business at the time. But now we're going into specialism. So when you think about how you evaluate people as a person now, what are the sorts of questions that you're asking? What are the top? Are there any like consistent traits that you're looking into, that you ask kind of every person, or that you're looking to in every Matt interview at Mews? What will that look like?
Yeah, so in the early days, I just needed people that if I throw a problem your way, you probably will know how to figure it out or where to find the
Mm.
information. We don't have time for that anymore. Right now, the scale is real. We like this year, we're expecting to grow by about 50%, and we're a massive company. So the challenge of hiring people means I have to find people who have already gone through this scale and who
Mm-hmm.
are excited to do it again and who are drivers in that journey. So, like I talk about drivers versus passengers, and it's very hard sometimes to identify if a candidate is actually a passenger of a very successful company
Mm-hmm.
and has seen something, or the driver who drove the change. And it's figuring out whether they were the driver or the passenger is a really important thing, because I want drivers, people who have helped a company grow beyond the size that we are, and who can tell you about that journey and the decisions that they made on that journey, because they're going
Mm-hmm.
to have to make those same decisions for our business again. And that's the kind of caliber of people that we're looking for today.
And so, how do you approach identifying that? I'd love to hear maybe a story about how you dug into that with in a positive and a negative way. Like, you found a candidate, you loved them, and what was the process you followed to get to whether answering that question?
So I always go for data. I'm like, give me a data point. Like, how big was the company when you entered, and how
Mm-hmm.
big was it after?
Yeah.
And then I try and dig into, okay, so you went from that size to that size. What were some of the decisions you made as you started scaling that team? Like, how did you structure the team that you're going to have? Because if you go from 8 people to 40 people, you need to go first principles and saying, okay, let me do some design on what my team structure will look like. And
Mm-hmm.
from the way that they talk through some of those challenges, you're like, okay, so this is a person that actually did the designing, or they were just executing on these things. And often asking for real data points, because if you lived deeply into the growth, you know the data points, you know the growth. I can talk about Mews and all of the massive like growth moments that we've had because I've lived it. Whereas if someone who's just been in a job, coming in 9 to 5, just doing the job, they don't know those numbers by heart because they're not deeply ingrained, because you
Mm-hmm.
haven't emotionally felt connected to the growth and the pain that you've gone through. So just ask for very specific, detailed numbers in the remit that these people are working in.
Yeah, so I kind of think about questions sometimes as as an upside down triangle. So you start with like this really broad question, and then you want to go mega deep over time, and that's kind of the truest like behavioral interviewing kind of star responses, is that you just go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper
I'll be
until you.
like, would you say that you're good at this skill? And most people will say yes. Great, let's go down that
Yeah.
rabbit hole. And you tell me, give me one example when you were better than other people at this particular skill. What did you do specifically that was better than what you've seen? So I love to just open up with a very leading question that
Mhm.
people will say yes to.
just to catch, but it's actually like it's not about catching them. It's about wanting to then interrogate and go deeper and help
Yeah,
justify and see a way of thinking and a methodology that's sitting behind it. Because I think that when you get to that leadership level, and most of your interviewing, I would be correct in saying is at that leadership level now. You're basically interviewing VPs and above
yeah.
professionally at this point. Is around how do you problem solve at scale, and have you built like frameworks and how you would approach solving problems as they come at you?
Yeah, so like right now, um, I interview much less than I ever did before because I really get the last round. So
Hmm.
the people that come into the room are often been filtered by 4 or 5 people
Hmm.
already. So I know that I don't need to ask them the questions to tell me about your history and things because if they made it to me, then I can go very deep on certain topics, and I know what the conversation is and I know what the scale is that that person will need to reach. So I can go very deep on. Tell me about what's about to happen to our business. How are you going to get us there? Like, what are the things you specifically would do if you
Hmm.
were faced with the problems? And I use real problems in our business. I throw instant problems that I'm facing today at them to see what they would do because I'm like, I'm struggling with this problem. You're clearly a specialist that we're looking to hire to solve a problem. Tell me about what you would do with this real problem, and it's really
Hmm.
helpful. And sometimes we don't hire the candidate, but I'll get some experience out of it because I love learning from candidates as well.
I think one of the things that I always enjoyed about recruiting a job history is that I get to learn so much about so many different things because I get to speak to deep specialists in so many different topics. And I think similar to you, we have to have a surface level of knowledge of a lot of different things. And I think that is kind of one of the core qualities of a good recruiter is that they can understand a lot, a little bit. Enough to be able to understand and even evaluate someone on that skill set as well, which I think is really complex. It sounds like you're now taking that a level further and going deeper, and it's that actual capability of how you evaluate people as a concept is the thing that you're now becoming a specialist at.
And I love when I meet someone who's so wicked smart that I walk away thinking that was such a good conversation. Yes, they're not for us, but the conversation was phenomenal,
Yeah.
and it's enriching to meet that level of person now. And because we are now at a scale where you just don't find a lot of this talent, getting to these unicorns of really talented people, it's a very variable time. And um, early on, I would say, okay, schedule me 20-minute interviews because I get bored with junior roles because I'm like, okay, I can cut through it very quickly. Whereas now, because of the talent that's in front of me, I'm like, if it's not an hour, it won't be enough because I have so much to talk about with these really great individuals.
We are so excited to be sponsored by HireGuide. HireGuide is an end-to-end interview decision platform that makes hiring decisions faster, fairer, and twice as predictive of on-the-job employee performance. As a recruiting leader, I've been looking for a tool that can help me run better interviews across my organization at scale to make better hiring decisions. So when I found HireGuide, I thought all my hopes had been answered. They use cutting-edge AI and behavioral science to enable you to operationalize structured interviews and skills-based hiring that can help you find those star candidates. Hiring a dream team is no easy task, but with HireGuide, it can be.
Talking about interviews then, what has been like one of the most memorable interviews you've ever gone through, and why?
So it would probably be our last chief marketing officer. I remember that she walked in and she knew how to storytell so incredibly well. And we weren't great at brand at the time. So we just had quite a flat tech brand. Like, you know, how, all these tech websites look the same. And she came in and she gave us shit. Like, she's like, you guys don't know how bad your brand is. Let me tell you, let me show you examples of things.
Mm-hmm.
And we love it when people tell us off. Like, great, you're fabulous. You should work for us. And then she joined and she transformed our current brand, and it was huge. And generally, people who are unafraid in an interview round to sit into these group interviews and just give us shit or saying like, I think you can do so much better. Great, tell me about it. What should we do better? I had a great interview for a finance person, and we said, could you just recreate our budget based on publicly available information? And a lot of people will be like, yeah, there's not enough information available. Great people will find the information. They'll be like, right, the pricing on your website is X. You set your 6,000 hotels, so I can take that price. You're going to discount 30 to 40%. Let me multiply that. There's payments revenue. The good people know how to rebuild a model without you telling much information to them, without you giving them budgets. And those are the people that I'm looking for.
I think it kind of goes back to what you said at the beginning in you want people who are going to disagree with you, but then also you want people who deeply understand their function so that they can really use the frameworks that they've established throughout their career to be able to apply it to any scenario that you're able to give them. And that's sort of both of those things that you're really assessing in those examples.
Yesterday in the corridors, I ran into one of our vice presidents and she said, I had the best interview, she said. And it's like, tell me about it. Like, I love it. And she said, this candidate had actually called our customers and interviewed them about their experience with Mews. And it showed that a candidate went beyond sending their resume and looking at our website. They actually spoke to a customer and said, tell me about this system that you've deployed. Why did you pick them? Why did you not pick the competitor? And it's those interviews that stand out because it is so rare that a candidate goes above and beyond to, like, you can either send your resume to 100 jobs and not really know what you're interviewing for, or you can do 3 applications and do them really, really well and nail a job.
Yeah, we talk about that so often because I think the kind of prevailing wind in social media says, like, here's this tool that'll help you apply to thousands and thousands of jobs. And like a company in the States just raised $200 million in a massive Series A to help, companies match and do this at scale and stuff. And actually, the reality is going deep is the way. And spending more, that same amount of time, but spending it on fewer jobs that you think you are deeply qualified for and that you think you have a deep impact with, and helping understand that business and show that you can solve their business problems. That is the way forward. Okay, slightly kind of different tack, but like over the past year, many of our kind of tier 1 tech companies that we've seen around the world have shifted their stance on kind of diversity and inclusion. So as a CEO, do you now feel kind of pressure to follow suit in that way? And then kind of as a follow-on to that, how do you personally now approach DEI at Mews?
Yeah, it's god awful what's happening out there, honestly. I find it, it's so limiting, that thinking, to say, we need more tech bros, and the tech bros need to protect the tech bros so that we can have more of that success. And I'm thinking that makes no sense to me whatsoever. Whilst I'm a white male, I'm also gay, and I'm openly gay. And having a diversity background, you realize how many times I've had to hide part of my identity, and it doesn't make for better companies. I think and it's one of the reasons why we're remote is because I want to be able to be accessible to any talent. And some people don't love being in an office because it is very extroverted. And some people, the best talent might not live in the location where my office is. But I want those people to come into Mews. And I deeply believe that a diverse company makes for more diverse and inclusive products as well. And I'm at a point where I just say no to events that I feel are not hitting the right point. The other day, I was invited to be a guest speaker at a Dutch event. And I said, I will only come if this is an English spoken event, because there's so much great English speaking talent in the Netherlands. And we as a company are struggling to build international companies. And it's because we insist on speaking our own language. And you've just excluded a whole bunch of phenomenal, talented people. And I'm not showing up if I don't get to speak English. I speak Dutch, but I don't want to, because I want the most inclusive potential environment for me to spend my time in. And they'll find a different speaker possibly to go and speak Dutch to this crowd. But I want to spend my time with the most diverse organizations because that just excites me.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really good answer. And as someone who works in the recruiting team, I think it's felt across the entire business. We've had a number of internal conversations about this at scale and how important this still is to be a leader in this space. And just because it's hard doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's the same with caring about people from all around the world. It's the same about remote work, I think, is one that we constantly battle with. It's hard doing remote work well, and not everyone enjoys it actually.
Yeah.
But we want to, but not just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
It's more scary because if I go out there on LinkedIn and I share my thoughts on this, people that are with opposing beliefs will feel like they're validated to call me out on
Yeah.
certain things, and I will go into that conversation. But I do think people that with a less stronger mind on this topic might just sit back for the next couple of years, and I'm like, no, this is the moment when we should step up to
Yeah.
the plate. But it is scary because suddenly some people feel validated that they can have these really extremist opinions on these topics, and it just doesn't help.
Okay. A couple of quick fire questions to finish us off with. If you were to ask one interview question to every candidate you ever met, what would it be?
The question I love is the legacy question, and I've started asking it very recently in most interviews, and it really hits a note.
Top 3 tips for a candidate looking to get a job at Mews.
Do something that stands out. Don't just send your resume. I like conciseness. I do not like big blobs of texts, and it drives me insane. And if that resume hits me, you're definitely not getting a job from Mews. And try and get a warm introduction. I think it matters. Like, find a way in, show that you've done your research and really deeply want this job.
Yeah. Showing that you've done your research is always comes up. So, and especially at Mews as well. Last 2 questions. Favorite hotel you've ever been to?
The Amanpuri. It's this hotel in Thailand, and I was gifted it for our wedding, and it ruined me because now I've experienced that there are hotels like that out there, and now I need to save up for these types of hotels.
And best restaurant you've ever been to?
So I'm not all about the Michelin stars. I'm more about schnitzels. So there's this schnitzel restaurant in Vienna that we love going to. I don't actually know the name. Every time we're in Vienna, we go to this particular restaurant. But if you serve me schnitzel, you'll make me the happiest person. Okay,
noted for next time you're in London. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on today. Really interesting to hear your journey through hiring over the last kind of a couple of years at Mews. And for everyone tuning in, listening, we'll be back next week, next Monday, with some more fantastic guests. Subscribe to our newsletter, theopentoworktoolkit.com, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you.